Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Johnson Financial Group, helping customers build financial plans around their unique goals for over 55 years. More at johnsonfinancialgroup.com. Johnson Bank and Johnson Wealth Inc. are Johnson Financial Group companies.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Here's one of our favorite conversations about the people, places, and organizations that shape Milwaukee.
Later this week, WUWM will begin a series about an out-of-state landlord that's being sued by the Milwaukee City Attorney's Office. Lake Effect Sam Woods and Jimmy Gutierrez will explore how some of David Tomblin's tenants have joined together to fight for their housing rights, and how the city is backing those residents and trying to loosen Tomblin's grip on the 260 properties he owns. Here's Sam and Jimmy with what you can expect.
Sam, I'm in your studio, right? This is like the Lake Effect studio.
You're invited.
I'm invited, right?
We have snacks somewhere around here.
Okay. Well, I'm in your studio, or we're in the studio, the Lake Effect studio, because we have this big project that's dropping on Thursday, and we just kind of want to talk about it, let people know what to expect, and share a little bit of what we heard when we were out reporting.
Let's do it.
All right. So what's the story? Fill us in.
Yeah. So this is a 3-part series about a few things. One is a large, in this case, out-of-state landlord, came into Milwaukee around 2017, went on a buying spree, ended up collecting around 260 properties, and for the most part did not address code violations, at least not in a timely manner, but certainly collected rent, often increased tenants' rent from what it was before he came in. And so our story is both the story of this landlord, David Tomblin, and his fall. And his fall was facilitated through a organization called Common Ground, organizing tenants to come to Tomblin with complaints together and documenting code violations that the city couldn't see from the street, and then ultimately uniting with the city to bring a large lawsuit that threatens to essentially take Tomblin's properties out of his hands.
Yeah, receivership is just a wild law that's been on the books, little used law. As you were talking about Tomblin and thinking about his business, High Grove Holdings, and the multiple LLCs that he also has that we learned through our journey in reporting. And if folks have been keeping up with the news, Tomblin has been in the news because everything has kind of like crashed in on him like a house of cards. And we got a little bit of tape from public policy research fellow John Johnson over at Marquette here to kind of talk about what the consequences are.
Well, they stopped paying their property taxes. They got sued by a bank that had lent them millions of dollars, and they got sued by a construction firm. That's not to mention the abysmal conditions that many of their tenants found themselves in, which ultimately led to this campaign by the community organizing group Common Ground against them and these lawsuits by the city attorney.
$600,000 in debt, back taxes, $6 million owed to U.S. Bank, and code violation riddled homes. And so we talked to a bunch of tenants. One that we really focus on in the first episode is Deshawn Harris.
Love her.
Yeah. How would you describe Deshawn Harris?
Ooh, she is a person who wakes up every day and just makes it work. She is proud of where she lives despite issues that have been consistent, especially with Tomblin over time. And she is a gifted storyteller and a gifted communicator is something that really came through, especially in our afternoon with her. She can connect with people in a way that seems effortless and that she's just kind of being herself. It doesn't seem like she's going out to connect necessarily or inspire. It's just kind of comes through as she speaks. Yeah,
we definitely spent more time with her than I was expecting, which was a great thing. Just kind of getting to know her, learn about her family, and then kind of her rental history. She'd been in the same spot for over 15 years now. It was just one thing after another. There's a giant hole underneath her front porch that she's terrified of.
About 5 feet deep,
yeah,
6 feet deep.
It's really something. It's huge. She was promised that would get filled back in at some point. I mean, that had been open for years. The backyard, which is completely filled with overgrowth, and there's
wires running through the overgrowth.
It's less of a backyard and more of a forest situation. The fact that she cannot shower in her own tub right now because the bathroom knobs are stripped. The leaking that was going on in her her spare bedroom. And she talks here about her breaking point dealing with all of this going on in the house.
You know, not only the hole up under the porch, the backyard, I can't take a bath or a shower. What got me is when a bullet came through my living room window and how long he took to repair it. That right there took the cake, you know. And I was paying my rent still. And I can't get this window fixed.
And so throughout our process and throughout episode 1, we kind of followed Deshawn through her experience and trying to find relief. And she does find relief, as you mentioned, Common Ground and all the work that they do, uniting tenants and organizing tenants. Kind of all came to a head when she shared her testimony for the first time publicly at Common Ground's internal assembly.
It's about time that someone heard my voice. I've been trying to get help for years about this person, David Tomblin, and I kept running into dead end walls. So God sent the right people, Common Ground, Tenant United. I'm so glad because I don't have to fight this battle by myself because this is a war.
And Jimmy, not only did we talk to tenants like Deshawn, but you also talked to Sharon Adams, who is a neighbor to a Tomblin property, a High Grove Holdings property. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I talked with Larry and Sharon Adams, and if you're from Milwaukee, you may know them from Walnut Way. Founders of it really did a lot of work transforming the Johnsons Park neighborhood, the Lindsay Heights neighborhood. And even though they're retired, they're still very much at it, like they do not slow down. And so they have started, their new project is Adams Garden Park, and it's this community space, which really still does a lot of the core tenets that they've been about for a long time, which is land stewardship, education, art education, and activating young people in the area. And when I talked with them, I had heard that they were trying to expand kind of the footprint of their park, which has a building, which has a walkway, which also has this art walk that you and I got to explore and like go down. And the park itself and the facility on either side, on both sides of the building, are buttressed by restaurants, you know, the 1700 pull-up and then favorites. So, you know, you have all of this development that's happening in this one corner on Fond du Lac Ave across the street from Johnson's Park, and everything's developing. And then right next to this art walk, which is a really kind of magical place, you have this rundown, dilapidated building that's all boarded up. And as you and I saw, there's a sign that says High Grove Holdings.
Front and center, yeah.
Front and center. And so it turns out that Sharon and Larry have been trying to buy this property for a long time. This is a whole part of activating this like little area, and they've just had no success. And so here's a little bit about them talking about that process and kind of what it means to them.
I've later learned that it is a holding company. So having a holding company, I don't know of the various investors that have participated in this endeavor. So I don't put it in a singular action. I put it in a plural action of those that would take and choose to have larger proceeds of their investment at the cost or missed cost of someone else's dignity. So I put it in that form. Okay?
You hear me going, because you asked about Tomblin, but it's much larger than that. It's a holding company with investors. And for years, we could not figure out who are these investors? Who would do something, like this to have no accountability to it, only to
gain profit.
To gain profit. And
speculative actions.
So it is, yes, Tomblin took advantage of us, our neighbors, our people, but he was that type of person. He take advantage, break the laws, and feel invincible.
So one interesting thing that I learned about how large landlords like David Tomblin work in Milwaukee is that they tend to buy properties in batches at a time from each other. And so, Larry and Sharon talked about difficulties in acquiring a property. I do not claim to know exactly what's going through Tomblin's mind or Highgrove Holdings' mind for that particular property, but oftentimes you'll see Tomblin bought 20 or more properties at a time from another large corporate landlord in these kind of batch deals. Oh. And so it's not really like outcompeting homeowners. It's more just like the kind of the convenience and the economy of scale of being able to say like, well, I'm just going to buy this batch of 20 houses and let's see what money we can make out of it. But going back to John Johnson, who we heard earlier, he talks about how this has had an impact on Milwaukee's housing market at large, especially since the 2008 financial crisis.
From like 1990 through 2005, about 80% of the houses in Milwaukee were owner-occupied, so that includes single-family homes and duplexes. And that dropped to like 68% during the long fallout from the mortgage foreclosure crisis. We actually lost homeowners year over year, every year through 2018, and didn't begin recovering until 2019.
I think the thing that we try to get into here is we try to show the story of who David Tomblin is. We want people to know both the effects of these kind of landlords, and it's not every landlord, but the effects these have not just within the city and a community, but also the people, the Deshaun Harrises. And what is the playbook? Like, what does this business model look like? Why does it take the shape that it does? And what does that mean ultimately for Milwaukee?
And then towards the end of the series, we'll get into the concept of receivership, which we touched on a little bit here. But essentially, the city of Milwaukee and U.S. Bank, who Tomblin owes a lot of money to, are looking to put over 200 of his properties into receivership, which essentially means he's cut off from income and someone else gets to run the place, collect rent, correct code violations, etc. And it's interesting to see how that will turn out. Does that mean that you see more homeowners like Deshaun in the future? Can't say for sure now, but I'm interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've done this reporting. We've put together these stories that will be airing, but this story of Tomblin and what happens to these properties, his impact on Milwaukee, is still ongoing. So where can folks listen and catch the first story and then the preceding stories?
Yeah, so part one, where we really get into who is David Tomblin, what does he represent, what was he trying to do here, that will air at noon on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM and wherever you get your podcasts. And then we'll air parts 2 and 3 in the Thursdays following. So this Thursday will be part 1, next Thursday part 2, Thursday after that part 3.
Yeah, looking forward to getting it out there and hearing people's responses. Like we said, there's been a lot of reporting about the lawsuit between the city and Common Ground towards David Tomblin. I think what we do is we try to dig a little bit deeper into what all that means for the city. So, yeah, looking forward to sharing that.
Let's do it.
That was WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez and Lake Effect's Sam Woods. You can find more reporting on the city's housing issues at WUWM.com/housing.
Lake Effect is a daily talk show on WUWM, Milwaukee's local NPR station. It's a show where we share the stories about the people, places, and organizations that shape the city. If you enjoyed this episode of Lake Effect Spotlight, subscribe to the podcast. You can find all of Lake Effect's conversations at WUWM.com/Lake Effect, and we're on the radio Monday through Friday at noon on 89.7.